The 193rd day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Let's consider the main events of this day. So, what did the General Staff of Ukraine and other sources say today? In the Donbass, the enemy attacked in a number of directions in the Donetsk region over the past day. The armed forces of Ukraine repulsed the attacks of the Russians in the area of Pasika, Dolina, and Bogorodny near Slavyansk. In the Bakhmut area, Russian troops advanced in the area of Bakhmutsky and Pokrovsky, as well as Bakhmut itself. The attacks were repelled. The Russians tried but failed to advance in the areas of Pesky and Pervomysky. In the Zaporizhzhia region, tension is growing again in the city of Energodar. The silence declared yesterday ended. This night the authorities appointed by Russia announced new arrivals. According to the deputy head of administration Rogov, who was appointed by Russia, the Dnieper power transmission line was interrupted. There were several explosions near the nuclear power plant. The station was not affected, but transferred to offline mode. He also reported about some boats with armed people who left the territory controlled by Ukraine. Aviation was raised, helicopters, Rogov said. The Russian Ministry of Defense later expanded on this information, saying that last night the Ukrainian armed forces allegedly made a new attempt to seize the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. In the description of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, this story looked like this: two groups of boats and motor boats with a total number of 42 units with a landing force of over 250 people from among the Special Operations Forces and foreign mercenaries attempted to land on the coast of the Kakhovka Reservoir in the area of Energodar and Dnepropetrovsk. The landing force was attacked by Russia with 4 Su-30 aircraft and 2 Ka-52 helicopters, as a result of which 20 boats were destroyed. The Russian military's previous statement about a Ukrainian landing at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was made on Thursday, on the eve of the IAEA mission's visit. I note that neither then nor now the Russian Ministry of Defense provided a video and photo of the landing, although for the first time it was reported about the dead and prisoners on the shore. All that was shown was a video of some burning barge. However, it must be said that the Ukrainian side also did not officially comment on the accusations of sending troops to the station, although it often refutes less serious statements by Russia. True, last night the General Staff of Ukraine reported that the Russians, sensing danger, tightened the administrative and police regime in the settlements located on the banks of the Dnieper River and the protection of the coastline in the temporarily captured areas of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. What kind of danger they feel was not specified, but, as we can see, Ukraine confirmed that Russia is preparing to repulse the water assault. Now let's move on to the situation in the south, where the Ukrainian counteroffensive is underway, about which, however, the Ukrainian side says almost nothing officially. The General Staff of Ukraine in its summary announced many airstrikes against Russian forces in the south. But nothing is said about ground operations. Meanwhile, ground battles in the Kherson direction are now very intense, which, among other things, is evidenced by the videos that appear on the web. At the same time, the Russian Defense Ministry continues to say that the offensive has completely failed. Russian military telegram channels also say that the attacks were repulsed everywhere, and in the area of the village of Sukhoi-Stavik, Ukrainian troops, according to them, fell into a firebag and were actually surrounded. And now the armed forces of Ukraine are making attempts to release them. The Ukrainian side, I repeat, does not comment on this information in any way. But Western sources comment in a positive way for Ukraine. British intelligence writes that there is an ongoing offensive on a broad front west of the Dnieper River, focusing on 3 directions within the Russian-occupied Kherson region. Britain calls the goals of the operation the Armed Forces of Ukraine Limited, that is, whether the occupation of Kherson is included in them is unknown. But Ukraine's forces have probably achieved a certain degree of tactical surprise, using poor logistics, administration, and leadership in the Russian military, says British intelligence. The American Institute for the Study of War says Russia is spreading disinformation about the failure of the Ukrainian offensive, taking advantage of Kyiv's silence on operations in the south. In general, the West is clearly very worried about Ukraine in this battle and is trying to positively present news from the south. Meanwhile, Arestovich, an advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, said yesterday that the ground component of the counteroffensive is not the main one. According to him, the main thing for the armed forces of Ukraine in the south is the strikes by HIMARS, Excalibur-guided missiles, probably on bridges, and HARM aircraft anti-radar missiles. Arestovich believes that Ukrainian intelligence works better than Russian intelligence, apparently due to the large-scale assistance of NATO intelligence. And in combination with the use of strike systems, it gives the best result for the armed forces of Ukraine. Our task is to reveal and cover what is happening with success. You should not expect brave offensives from us, like they have in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. We will realize our advantages, the advisor to the president's office said. That is, judging by the words of Arestovich, Kyiv's strategy is to force the Russians to leave the right bank of the Dnieper on their own, under a hail of blows from HIMARS on bridges and rear, without getting involved in large-scale ground battles, where Russia just has its own advantage, as acknowledged by an advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine. By the way, Western bloggers, referring to satellite images, write that the Novokakhovka bridge has already collapsed under the blows of the armed forces of Ukraine. If so, then Ukraine's counteroffensive in the south could indeed drag on for a very long time. But while the situation on the ground confirms the picture drawn by Arestovich, we see contact battles of local importance around several villages along the line of demarcation. These battles continue with varying success for both sides. And the main battles take place in the rocket and artillery sphere. In this regard, another assessment of the situation in the south of Ukraine was made. British military analyst Robert Fox said that Ukraine's Kherson offensive is more symbolic than strategic, writes the Evening Standard newspaper. Against the strong advice of the military, President Zelensky ordered an attack on Kherson before September 1st. Secure Kherson and ports west from Nikolaev to Odessa and its satellite ports is necessary for the safety of Ukrainian forces and shipping until next spring. Military advisors said Ukraine needed to raise more fully trained forces with tactical and strategic reserves to ensure success. Zelensky has demanded urgent action because he fears that a sense of stalemate at the front is undermining support for allies, especially the European Union. The general election campaign in Italy has activated the peace camp. Supporters of the right-wing coalition likely to come to power on September 25th say Italy is ideally placed to broker a deal with Moscow to restore cheap Russian gas supplies. That's all for now. I'm waiting for your opinion in the comments. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Thank you.